don't know, people's behavior changes based on the built environment around them, and that's not to say that education and other things aren't really important, but it discounts the idea that people will respond and change their behavior based on the built environment. Yeah. I think we should hang a right.
You're talking about social engineering, which is another phrase that's come up this election year. Bryant Avenue is social engineering.
Well, all infrastructure is social engineering. I don't know what people want.
Okay. Well, don't yell at me. It's not
I'm
my
not yelling
theory.
at you.
Or, oh, we're going
That's
this way?
not turning.
Sorry, I'm focused so much on podcasting that I'm not making my turns.
That's all right.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
Okay, we're back on the Wedge Live podcast / bike ride today with Elissa Schufman here in downtown Minneapolis in front of beautiful, glorious Minneapolis City Hall. How are you, Elissa?
I'm good. It's perfect weather for a bike ride.
It is.
Yeah.
September 28th. And we're going to be biking to the west down the 4th Street bikeway. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
Okay, let's go.
Helmet-free ride. Have you ridden this bikeway before?
It's hard to remember. Maybe for a short stretch. I usually ride downtown Washington, which is similar to this one.
It's similar to this one. This is like I think a lot of the things that I wish Washington were. So we can bike it and talk about it.
We maybe didn't introduce you fully enough. You're a transportation professional. Can I call you that?
Sure.
And you do a lot of volunteer work. You serve on the bicycle advisory committee with the city. Yeah. So you know a lot of stuff.
I know a lot of stuff. Yeah.
So we're going to hear about it.
Other people also know stuff, but I'm in a lot of spots where I get a lot of information.
Let's go.
Cool. Let's do this bikeway. So I love almost everything about this bikeway project, except for there used to be, along this side of City Hall, like 30 bike racks, and they took them all out and they put back in 6 bike racks across the street there.
I don't park a ton at City Hall. Is there enough bike parking here?
No, I don't think there is. At the very least, when the Bicycle Advisory Committee meets once a month, it has almost 30 members.
That's gonna be hard.
Yeah, so that committee now meets in the new consolidated office building, but they only have about 10 bike racks out front, and yesterday they were filled with the Lime bikes.
I've been in the new building, and they have like a bike storage room for employees, city employees, which is kind of nice, but obviously you can't use that, can you?
I can't. But I did provide comments on it back when they were designing it. The whole committee did.
So, Elissa, we just faced a difficulty that people are facing every day in Minneapolis, which is a pedestrian in this sidewalk level bike path. Is that a problem?
You know, I think that to some degree, yes, but not because I think like pedestrians are the problem, because I think like we could always use more space for people walking and biking. And people are still not used to these like nice off-street bikeways. Like you and I know what they are, but most people are not in the habit of thinking about bikes as a sidewalk level activity.
Is there a better way to do it? Why not curb protected and in the street? When
you think about designing bike facilities for what they call the All Ages and Abilities Network here in Minneapolis, so that's like loosely 8 to 80 is the framework they think about. Having something that is sidewalk level is much more friendly and approachable for folks who are not as comfortable on bikes. And you can see there are, at least I think they're further down on this facility, but there are some sections of this that dip down a little bit. And one of the things that happens when you have a curb separated bike facility between the cars and the sidewalk is that in the winter here, all of the snow and the melt and the ice ends up draining into the bike facility. So having it raised does help mitigate some of that, like the freeze-thaw cycle.
Also, having it a two-way makes it just the right size to park your car in.
It does, unfortunately.
Having a sidewalk level kind of discourages the parking.
It does. Although I have had a number of people send me photos. Maybe I can send one to you and you can splice it into this moment in the video.
Don't give me editing work.
So some of the things, like at the end of this block where we have a bollard in the middle of the bikeway, so this block in particular was a culprit block for people parking in it. And so having that bollard in the middle helps cars know that like they're not supposed to go down here. So this section right here is where, if you look right behind us, where all the ice drains into the bikeway, and that's designed particularly here.
Well, people don't bike in the winter, Elissa.
I guess I don't exist.
We have 8 months of winter, sometimes 12 months of winter here. You hear that at public meetings all the time. We have too much winter. Nobody bikes in the winter. Why do we need this waste of money called bike infrastructure? Luther Ranheim in Ward 12 wants to defund the city's bike infrastructure. Do you have any feelings about my comments?
Well,
Hey.
Seeing people on bikes is one of my favorite things in the whole world.
You run into people when you're biking. What do you think of the usual bike and NIMBY lines? So one, we're already a top biking city. We've gone too far. And also it's a waste, too much winter, nobody bikes.
Yep.
And we need parking. People drive, hardly anyone, the numbers of bikers don't justify the expense, the fact that I can't park out front anymore. What do you think about those common criticisms?
I said this as part of my presentation to the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee a couple weeks ago. We're designing for the cities we have, not the cities we want. And so I think people have this idea that like their behavior is immutable and they are not influenced by the way that our cities are built. But they are, I am, right? There are choices I make about where I bike and bike routes that are different than they were before those infrastructure changes were made. And so, I don't know, people's behavior changes based on the built environment around them, and that's not to say that education and other things aren't really important, but it discounts the idea that people will respond and change their behavior based on the built environment.
Yeah.
I think we should hang a right.
You're talking about social engineering, which is another phrase that's come up this election year. Bryant Avenue is social engineering.
Well, all infrastructure is social engineering. I don't know what people want.
Okay. Well, don't yell at me. It's not
I'm
my
not yelling
theory.
at you.
Or, we're going
That's
this way?
not turning.
Sorry, I'm
No.
focused so much on podcasting that I'm not making my turns.
That's all right. Everyone who does any kind of advocacy and organizing, right? What the city would call a special interest group, which is everyone. Everyone has a special interest. I'm curious to get at some of the things that underlie some of these talking points, right? Because when we engage in these conversations, they're almost scripted, right?
Yeah.
The reason your satire works so well and the reason that other people can do satire about public meetings.
They are cliches.
But there's really a difference between people responding intentionally and in an integrated way from a place of values. Like there's a difference between that and regurgitating talking points that sort of sound good, right? Yeah, I don't know. I would just love to have some conversations with people. I suspect I know some of the things that underlie those talking points, but people are complicated.
God, we've had to bypass our first car parked in the bike lane.
Are we keeping count?
No. We can, if it's fun for you. I'm not one of those bike rage people. I don't have stickers ready to put on their bumpers. I'll say it again. It's culture war. There's a lot of resentment against the kinds of people who ride bikes. They're not like us. And they're ruining the city. And I just reflexively hate all bike infrastructure. This is a lovely part of the city to bike through.
It's much better than it was when I started biking in it like 10 years ago. Ooh, I wonder if the weird connect behind the old bar is still there. You want to take a right? We might dead end. I'm making routing changes in real time.
Okay, we're on a bumpy brick road. YouTube.com/Wedge Live to see us bump over this road.
But not into the parking ramp, to the left of the parking ramp.
Okay.
To the thing that looks like a bike
I don't want
trail.
you taking me into a secure area. Was this the Federal Reserve? What is that?
I think that is their parking lot. But this is a public trail. This is a connect to the Cedar Lake Trail. Just for a while it was under construction, and then there was a pandemic, and I haven't been down here very much.
You know, I can never tell when a bike trail I used to ride is closed, and so I've stopped trying. Can I take this one all the way to like Lowry Hill if I wanted to? Is it open? Do you know?
That way?
Yeah.
I don't know, because I did the same thing. I stopped riding it. Last summer, it was only open to about the Metro Transit headquarters.
We've had a lot of trails closed for what feels like forever. Do you think that's been handled right? Was it avoidable at all?
I mean, you have to close things to fix them. I think that is real. I think the question of where and when we're building transit facilities that overlap with bike trails is a meaningful one, right? The Midtown Greenway. There have been people talking for a long time about building some kind of transit on that trail. This idea of like co-locating our big transit lines with walking and biking facilities continues to be appealing. This concept of like rails to trails, right? Like came from that place of like, we're not using these transit corridors for the things that they used to be used for, so let's turn it into a bike trail. I don't know. I mean, I would love for the trails to be closed less, but also we chose to build a train through a swamp and it took extra time. I don't know what people were expecting out of that.
It's true. Everyone should stay tuned till the end because we have a massive hill planned and we're going to breathe real heavy into the microphone.
We'll go real slow. I'll put it on my gear 1 of 10 or 10 of 10. I don't know which one's the easy. So have you already shared about your bike? This is my first time seeing your bike.
I don't know if I've talked about it a ton other than referencing that I have a bike. What else is there to say, Elissa? I'm not a bike nut like you.
Just because I ride my bike everywhere doesn't mean I actually know that many things about bikes. I can fix a flat. I can change my pedals.
So it's nice to ride, although I don't have much to compare it to besides a really heavy bike share bike that was, you know, I didn't have to worry about braking because if it did, I could just stop riding it and get a different one. It's been nice. I'm riding more.
It's a very pretty bike. So the first thing I always want to know when people get a bike is what color is it?
Black.
Yeah, it's matte black.
It's got a carbon belt drive.
I don't know what that is.
It's not a metal chain. So
that's why it makes different noises.
Yeah.
Your clicking noises sound different than mine.
More durable, don't have to fix it as much. I have to carry it upstairs though, because bike theft is an issue in the city.
I also bring my bikes inside.
I think, so there was a post on Reddit. Someone was considering, they wanted to get a bike. They had a bike where they used to live, which was kind of a small town area, but they were like seriously concerned about bike theft. They didn't want to spend like $700 on a bike and have it get stolen, because that's a lot of money to them. I had the same concerns when I got my bike, and so what I did was I watched a ton of bike theft videos on YouTube and got really paranoid.
Like videos showing people how to steal bikes?
No,
What?
not showing people how to steal bikes, just talking about how to prevent bike theft and like researching locks. So I got like a lock that is way overkill, that is angle grinder resistant. And I feel pretty good now, but I was kind of worried too. I didn't want to have a big chunk of money lost, have my bike get stolen. So that's a long way of asking, what do we do, Elissa? Have you thought about that as a member of the Bicycle Advisory Commission? Issues like secure bike parking, preventing bike theft, because we talk about carjacking a lot, but what happens when you get your bike jacked? That's transportation for somebody that someone depends on. That could be a huge financial deal for them, and it feels like we talk about Hyundais and Kias, and not much about bike theft.
I think this is probably part of why we get real stuck with things. We being Minneapolis, we being Minnesota, we being the United States. Because when you think about why people steal bikes, it's mostly because it's easy money.
Right.
To solve theft, you have to solve a lot of other societal problems. And that's not to say we can't take measures in the interim, right? That we can't provide better bike parking, better indoor bike parking, that we can't have better ways of like getting people reconnected with bikes that are recovered after they're stolen. I mean, the legislature just passed this past legislative cycle a law that says, right, because we're having all these catalytic converter thefts. I don't actually know how many we're having. My sister came to town visiting from Missouri and got her catalytic converter stolen. And so they passed this law that says either the catalytic converter has to be attached to the car, or you have to have proof that you own a car and that car has to be connected in some way to the catalytic converter, right? Like, we could require more of that kind of thing for bikes also. I'm sure that there are downfalls to that or drawbacks that I haven't thought through yet.
It feels like an underrated obstacle. We talk a lot about bike infrastructure and safety, which is huge, and I care about that a lot. But I think it's an underrated obstacle for people just feeling like safe parking their bike when they get to a destination. If you're going to bike for transportation, it's better that people feel comfortable parking when they get to a place.
Yeah, and there's nothing like looking around in a residential neighborhood and being like, well, I guess the stop sign at the end of the block is my best option.
Yeah.
I think too, there's also different ways we could think about insurance, right? A thing you can do as a renter or as a homeowner is include a bicycle on your insurance so that it's covered. Wait, where are you going?
Oh, I don't know. I thought we were going left.
No, I want to go over to, well, I don't know how much of it we'll really be able to see, but this general area, which is where we're going to have sometime in the next couple years. If I were better, I would have looked up the project date, but across from where this like bridge is over here, right? So you can see there's the bridge, there's the little creek, and then there is the section of actual dirt and things underneath there. So they're going to put a tunnel through there with a bike connection so that you can get to the Graco Park that is under construction on the other side and connect to the trail.
Where's the tunnel going to be?
Right through, like right underneath there.
So in relation to where the stairs are?
Pretty close to where the stairs are.
Yeah, so yesterday I went over the bridge thinking, well, gee, there must be a path under that bridge somewhere.
There's
and
not.
there's no
there's
path.
not. But there will be. There will be. So a thing to look forward to. So the park is obviously not done on the other side either, but that'll get done, and then we'll have a trail connection under here. And anyway, schedule your bikes on your insurance, people. If you have renter's insurance, if you have homeowner's insurance.
Also, don't buy a too expensive bike and get a really nice lock. The usual advice is make sure you don't have the nicest bike or the easiest bike to steal, right? Make sure there are nicer, easier bikes to steal than yours.
Yeah, I don't know that is true for me, unfortunately. You probably got a better lock than I do. I think I've got a nicer bike than you do.
I'm just very paranoid. It doesn't mean you're at risk.
Well, I know, but so there are the like financial and logistical implications of having a bike stolen. I don't want to undersell those. Those are significant. They suck. But like, man, my bike is one of my best friends. The amount of hours I have spent with this bike. My bike has a name. It is Ruby Rod.
Ruby Rod?
Yeah. I will be very sad if my bike ever gets taken.
Well,
my bike's got a personality. You'll get to know yours over time.
Okay, well maybe you need a better U-lock.
I probably do. But this is the one that fits on my bike frame.
Okay. So you gave a presentation to the city council, like, what was it, 2 weeks ago? Last week? So one of the things I've been saying is we don't spend any money on bike infrastructure. This idea that you're going to defund bike infrastructure and pay for other stuff,
Yeah.
There's no money in it.
Buy somebody some coffee.
It's a really dumb idea. Great pander, but not going to work for you. And what I was hearing from you in that meeting is we need to spend actual money implementing the Transportation Action Plan.
We do.
And I wonder what you meant by that.
Well, so something that we have done for a number of years at the Bicycle Advisory Committee is take a look at like, what are we actually spending money on at the city as far as capital projects that are transportation infrastructure. Unsurprisingly, our city budget overwhelmingly goes toward, at least again, the chunks of it that are capital, that are focused on transportation, is overwhelmingly focused on car infrastructure. And that's not to say that we don't get some significant bike improvements out of those, some of those projects, right? But there are plenty of projects where we don't get significant walking or biking or transit improvements. The way that our existing departmental and city budgeting process is set up, I just don't think we're in a position to ever really get there, right? Our budget process says, well, when we're doing capital projects, things that are previously in the budget get like weighted and have a better chance of being funded, right? So we're like inclined to build the things we've already said we should build. We do everything with this 7-year horizon, and no one has taken, as far as I can tell, seriously the exercise of halting the gears that are grinding our current budget process and saying, like, what if we scrapped it all and started over, right? Like, what if we really started our budgeting process from a place of, we need to make these kinds of improvements for our climate, for our communities, for our local small businesses. Like, what would it look like? What would it take for us to do that? I haven't seen any evidence that anybody's having that level of conversation, right? We're having conversations that are about how to tweak the last 10% of the budget so that we can get one more bikeway project in, or move one bikeway project up a couple years, but it's not like a transformative overhaul. And I just don't think what we've got in place process-wise is gonna do that, right? It's gonna be transformative, right? So like, what if we took off the table the assumption that like we're gonna build the big road projects we already said we would build,
Give me an example of the kind of thing we would do. Give me the name of a street or the kind of street, or so what would we do to do the thing you're talking about?
I'm going to talk about Lake Street because I live near
Yes,
Lake Street.
Lake Street.
Yep. And this is not a city project, right? This is a county project. So it just, like, Hennepin County owns and manages the corridor. So I don't want to pin a thing on the city that they don't have total control over, but also everyone is at least partially accountable for Lake Street, is what I'll say about Lake Street. So Lake Street is, right, it's got a bunch of intersections on the Vision Zero High Injury Network. It's a dangerous street for people walking, biking, and driving. It's a 4-lane undivided road, which is like the most dangerous type of street locally, right? The intersections of 4-lane undivided road with a 4-lane undivided road are bad. Lake Street and Lyndale Avenue before the 4-to-3 conversion is a great example of like a 4-lane undivided road meeting a 4-lane undivided road.
No intersection has ever attempted to murder me so many times as a pedestrian. I don't bike through it.
Yeah.
Just as a pedestrian, that's...
Yep. So we're making some transit improvements on Lake Street, which is great. We're gonna have the B-line, which is great, but we are not fundamentally changing the like typology or curb to curb width of that street, right? One of the things that makes the street safer for people walking, for people at intersections, is that the street is not so wide. And so we are not transformatively or seriously reconsidering, like, what does it mean to travel on Lake Street? What is the experience of being a person who sometimes walks, who sometimes bikes, who sometimes takes transit on Lake Street? And how are we taking the money we have to do radically different things, right? My personal dream, right, is that Lake Street becomes a corridor that is entirely closed to cars and just has 2 transit lanes and a dedicated bike lane and super wide sidewalks, and every restaurant in that corridor has the ability to have like an amazing outdoor space, and it is a destination, right?
You're gonna scare people. That gives people visions
Oh no,
of banned
burritos
cars.
on the patio.
Ban cars. I won't be able to drive anywhere.
But what happens right now, right, is I'm a person who lives 2 blocks from Lake Street. And when I lived on the north side of Lake Street, I did not patronize any businesses on the south side of Lake Street.
Yeah.
I had to cross Lake Street. And I was within a half block. And now that I live on the south side of Lake Street, I don't really patronize businesses on the north side of Lake Street, right? Yeah, so obviously we don't have money set aside to reconstruct Lake Street in its entirety for a while.
Because they just redid it in 2007. This is why I get so worked up every time a street reconstruction comes through. You could say once in a 50-year opportunity.
Yep.
Every time. It really is. Elissa, you and I will be dead. I don't want to predict your death, but every reconstruction that comes through, you and I will be dead before they get around to resetting where the curbs are.
Yep.
Ripping it up and putting stuff back in. Like these are, this is our chance. And you're saying we shouldn't have to wait that long?
Well, and I think we shouldn't have to, right? So part of the challenge is that we wait until we have these massive amounts of money to do these total reconstruction projects, right? I don't know if we've talked about this, but right, in the land of planning and engineering, a resurfacing is where they take off the top 2 inches and they put the 2 inches back down to extend the life of the street. And then a reconstruction is where they tear it all up and kind of start over, right? So this total reconstruction.
They're doing the utilities under the ground. They're putting pipes in.
Yep. They're considering, like, can the curbs move, right? So that's what was happening with Hennepin Avenue South.
And,
that was a reconstruction.
People see the bill for that and they're like, well, obviously all 20 million of this is going towards bike lanes. Or they'll say, obviously all the trees that die will be because of the bike lanes. The street was going to get torn up either way. The money was going to get spent either way. And we're just putting it back together in nicer condition because we're here already.
Well, now we're going to see if the thing that I wanted to bike is in fact fenced off.
It's one of my favorite routes in the city. Although it is very potholed and it's unofficial. We're probably not allowed here. What's the status of this? I always wonder. Are we allowed to take this route?
I've been on many a group bike ride that has gone this way. Anyway, so we wait for these big reconstruction projects to really think seriously about how could we radically change a streetscape. And then when we do radically change a streetscape, right, and we're only doing like, I don't know, a handful of these big transformative projects every year, right? We're not touching 10% of the streets in Minneapolis. I don't know, we're sort of undershooting the mark, right? We need to be making a lot of very big changes when we do change the limited number of streets we do. Or we need to really rethink what we're trying to accomplish, right? The fact that one of the driving factors in whether or not we redo a road is the pavement condition index, the PCI. Basically, how worn down is it and how much longer can we put off replacing the street until it will cost us way more to replace. Like that leads us to make choices assuming that we're going to have these same levels of driving on every street, right? That it's going to experience the same level of wear. We are again planning for the cities we have, not the cities we want. It's always so funny to go under the highway.
Why is that?
2 sets of values conflicting, I don't know.
Yeah.
They're meeting in real time, in real space.
So whenever I get down and think about how terrible things are, I think about how far we've come. I feel like the city's come a long way since I moved here in 2012 in terms of infrastructure. Am I correct?
I think so.
Yeah, I feel good about that.
Yeah.
The transportation action plan is great. I like that.
Now we just got to do it.
Do you think, so I say about the 2040 plan, like forget the NIMBY lawsuit, the policies and values in the 2040 plan, like we won that battle in 2018. 12-1 vote on the city council. That wasn't a mistake. We're not gonna undo it. Might delay it, we won't undo it. How do you feel about the transportation action plan? Is that a battle? Like, it's on paper, it's in a little booklet. We've won, not going back. Because I feel like we do a lot of defensive measures. Like, we've won it, we gotta make sure we don't lose it. Are we at risk of losing it?
I mean, I think the transportation action plan is one dimension of the work that has to happen, right? It sets out and makes clear the strategies and the vision for the work that has to happen, but that is different than implementing the work.
Right.
Like, I don't think anyone's gonna be like, yeah, we'll cancel the transportation action plan, this vision isn't in place anymore. But we do, again, have to like take seriously the exercise of like, what does it mean not just to plan about the things we wanna do, but to do the things, right? We're in this ongoing, challenging, I don't know what we would call it, fight about the 2040 plan. And you know, it's gonna start like any minute now, the 2050 plan. We collectively spend so much time planning, and we're pretty good at planning, right? We being the city, we being the county, we being the Met Council, we being the state. We're very good at planning things and setting goals that feel transformative. And we're not as practiced at implementing the plans.
Yeah, in some ways, I'm pretty sure the 2040 plan felt like seriously controversial at the time. And so I feel like the politics are messier and more bitter with transportation, now at least.
Well, even things that are, so we're on the number 9 bridge, right? This bridge that I, for the longest time, did not realize probably used to be U of M maroon. And is now pink. Even when, so a couple years ago I was on CLIC, right? The city's advisory committee that like looks at, so like a bunch of residents who sort of look at the capital chunk of the city budget and make recommendations to the mayor's office. And he takes some of those and he rejects some of those. It's an advisory committee, so it doesn't have any institutional authority to demand things, just recommend. And even in conversations with that group of people who are like generally somewhat informed about city policy, it was a real fight to get that group to accept that putting in the budget money to maintain the number 9 bridge as a walking and biking facility was important and we should do it, right? There's no businesses on this bridge. There aren't 15 very large moneyed community stakeholders. There's one very large moneyed community stakeholder, and it's the U of M, and I guess the city. Anyway, so like, yes, it's complicated, and also the status quo is just very good at saying like, we don't need money for those things. To your earlier point, the divide and conquer us and them tactics are very effective. Those people who walk and bike over that bridge, they don't need that.
Alyssa's about to take me
all right, we made it to the river.
Massive hill.
First is the fun part where we go down, and then the less fun part near Franklin where we go up.
I feel like this makes a great travel video for Minneapolis. You can learn about transportation politics. I'm just gonna let myself go faster.
Mm-hmm. Goodbye. It was nice knowing you.
You're not coming with me?
Sorry, I'm just trying not to run into your back wheel. Didn't want to lose my coasting energy before we start going up.
A great travel video. You can learn about transportation politics in Minneapolis. You can see the sights. What a lovely city.
It is a lovely city.
You're commuting by bike full time all year long, right?
I am. I'm one of those non-existent winter bikers. I'm curious what, you don't bike in the winter, right? Or you have not?
I've never had the opportunity to bike in the winter. I don't conceive of myself as a potential all-year biker. I might go into, I'm not gonna bike in snow. I'm not changing my tires to bike safely in the winter. I think I could deal with the cold for shorter rides. I don't know if I want to gear up and be one of those people in goggles. My glasses, I have a difficult time with my glasses fogging when I'm a pedestrian.
Yep.
So I would have to figure that out. But I could see myself going into November if we have mild weather. Climate apocalypse is upon us, so that'll make it easier.
It is. It's making the nice weather longer every year and then the cold weather colder. Yeah, I think I had a pretty similar set of concerns to you before I started doing winter biking. I just have an entirely separate bike because I also was like, I'm not going to change my tires, and your bike is actually a little better suited for winter biking than mine. You have to be very coordinated to have drop handlebars and bike on them in the winter.
Oh, are you a very coordinated person?
No, that's why I have a different bike with very wide, very flat handlebars.
What is the thought process with the handlebars? How do you decide?
Well, for me, right, I'm a person with injuries. And so one of the things I need is to be able to like constantly shift my grip position on my bike. And so having, you know, a spot up near the brakes, a spot down on the drop handlebars, a spot at the top of the handlebars relieves pressure on different parts of my arm and my hand. I'm sure the racy types who go faster than I do like them because when you lean over, you go faster. Wind resistance, something like that.
Are you excited about any particular infrastructure projects coming up, or something you think that's desperately needed that people should focus on?
I mean, I think, you know, as we go into the budget cycle for the fall, one of the things always to keep an eye on is funding for Vision Zero, right? That is the thing the city currently has available to make fast changes, and to make those fast changes in places where they will make the most difference. Continuing to make sure that that program is adequately funded would be great. A thing that I am...
So are we referring to the traffic calming thing that had like 700 and some applications, and I forget how many were selected, 15, 20, around in that range?
Yeah, so I think the neighborhood traffic calming program is different than the Vision Zero treatments because the...
So tell me about Vision Zero then, like what's in the budget and what do they do if it's separate from that traffic calming thing?
Well, so traffic calming is more community driven, right? Like you as a community member say, hey, I live somewhere, or I use an intersection regularly, right? Maybe it's on your commute to school. And you have identified that like people are regularly speeding or exhibiting other unsafe driving behaviors at an intersection. And so you apply to the city, you say, hey, I've identified this intersection. Then the city goes through their process and figures out what among those community applications is the highest priority. And then they have funded those, right? It's a formalization in some ways of a process that used to happen really informally, where the neighbors who were the most organized or the loudest in terms of reaching out to like their council member and the mayor could get spot improvements in their neighborhood. But neighbors who maybe were not as organized or didn't have that level of access didn't get those improvements. So it's really about like standardizing a community identified process. Okay, here we go, it's the beginning of the hill.
We've been doing a lot of that. So the 2040 plan standardized a lot of zoning because wealthier neighborhoods, they get special attention, they get down zoning over the years, and we end up with this patchwork of special considerations. Transportation, I think, is like that a lot too, where if you have a wealthy neighborhood and a council member like Lisa Goodman, they can kill improvements in their ward that would totally sail through in another part of the city. So it's what I kind of appreciate about some of these new city policies, is that we're making it so ideally every part of the city is treated the same. We're all either having to build housing, all having to build the same kind of bike, walk, and bus infrastructure. And I'm huffing and puffing up this hill.
You know, we could just go slower. And that's not to say the new process is perfect, right? The people who are gonna be more in the know that that process exists,
right,
are gonna be people who are more tuned into city process. But it's a step in the right direction for sure. Traffic calming, community driven. Vision Zero, driven by that severe and deadly crash data that identifies intersections and corridors that are more dangerous in the city and says these are the areas where we need to make improvements, right? Vision Zero is really very much about like how many low-cost, quick-build things can we do in like a 3 to 5 year period, at least for the infrastructure parts of that plan. Other staff at the city would know better whether, for example, we've installed a traffic circle as part of Vision Zero. I don't know that we have. I've seen a lot of like bollards that bump out curbs, bollards that get put at intersections where people tend to hook a left turn very, very quickly.
Woo! How much more hill we got?
That was pretty much the worst of it. There's like a little bit, but.
How long have you been politically active locally?
I think you asked me this question first time I came on your show.
Really?
Not very.
Not very?
Yeah, like 20.
Feels like you've been around forever.
2020.
You're an old timer. 2020?
Yeah.
That's when you got on the bicycle advisory committee?
No, oh yes, no, we did have exactly this conversation because I said that's local government, not local politics, and you said
it's politics. Everything's politics. I'm glad I'm recreating conversations.
It's okay, no one will remember that but me.
I mean, if you're pushing for better street infrastructure, that's politics. How long have you been doing that?
Since 2015.
Okay. Why give yourself, why not give yourself more credit? Or are you trying to hide?
No, it's just...
Trying not to be labeled a career activist.
I think the ship has sailed on that. Probably for both of us.
What did you do in 2015?
I joined the Bicycle Advisory Committee.
Oh.
And I also got hit by a driver.
Oh. That's what motivated it?
Yeah, I think so.
So you never, you weren't writing emails to your council member about stuff prior to 2015?
No.
Really?
Yeah. No, I grew up in a family that has a lot of, my parents at least have very different. Do you not know? Oh, this is the Greenway. Oh my God, that came up fast. No, it's not.
Well, I'm so focused on podcasting.
I was like, why are you turning? This is not where the Greenway is. Maybe it is. No, it's not.
No.
Now we're just going to be meandering.
Where is the Greenway?
It's down under, you have to go under the bridge.
Oh, geez. I never bike this way. All these intersections look the same.
They do all look the same. Yeah, I didn't really grow up in a family that was super politically active. My parents had really differing political views than I did. So I didn't have a lot of like obvious, they weren't like, here, I'm involved in this thing, you should get involved in it too.
I was telling somebody recently, I am from a place that has no local politics, a very suburban place where maybe you vote for county commissioner, you don't know what your county commissioner does, and they probably don't do much for you. Very car oriented. And one of the great things about Minneapolis, and the very terrible things about Minneapolis, very politically active. And so lots of very smart, talented people. And this person asked me, like, what do I think is different about Minneapolis than other places? And I can't say I have a ton of experience with other places to really make that distinction, but I think maybe one of the things we do right is how much people care and are involved and like have the luxury of spending some of their free time trying to make change. I don't know if that's a function of prosperity, maybe?
Yeah, I would be curious about that. It's interesting because like plenty of people I know are not involved at all, right? Like,
right. Well, there's always going to be a vast majority of people who don't know, don't care, aren't involved. Maybe because they're busy, not because they're bad people. But in terms of our minority of people who are involved is maybe larger than other places. Yeah. But I'm pulling that out of my butt.
I'm curious with we talk about, I'm going to get it backwards, but St. Paul is a large, small town and Minneapolis is a small, large town.
Yeah.
I think I got it backwards. I just wonder if that has anything to do with it, right? That sense of like people knowing each other or having network in that way.
Do you have recommendations for how people, I don't know if this is even good to talk about because I assume everyone listening and watching this podcast is already very involved and emailing and calling the hell out of their council member and their county commissioner over these things and the mayor. But do you have any tips and tricks on how to make a difference on transportation? Because it can be a really powerful thing. Not a lot of people are involved, so if you become one of them, you have a ton of power.
I mean, I would be curious what other people say in response to that question too. But I mean, the things that I think about are, I mean, I always go to narrative and movement building, right? So a thing that a lot of progressives are really, really, really good at is data and facts, right? About why we should do the thing. And one of the things that is really challenging is that when we, as like the left, the progressives, whatever term you want to use for left of center, engage in debate, for lack of a better term, with folks who have differing viewpoints, often we come to that discussion with a presumption that a thing that we share a value around is facts and science and data. And that's just like not true, right? And so we engage from a place of persuasion that speaks to a value that isn't shared and thus is not terribly effective, right? Like many people just do not care or believe, I'm floundering for like a specific example of a talking point, but whatever the data is, it will show you, right? It's not the thing that's going to convince people.
Let's use parking as an example. The city can do a parking study and show you that, like, hey guys, only 20% of this parking is getting used typically, and we want to take 50% of it. This is not a specific example, just like a thing I'm spouting off about. People will say, no, there's actually a shortage of parking, and the city did the study on the wrong day. We were all out of town that weekend that you did that study.
Yeah.
And it's not valid.
That is a very great example. That happened with the Summit Avenue project, right?
Oh, did you pay a lot of attention to that?
I paid some attention to that, yeah.
They're going to kill all the trees. 1 million trees, I heard. This bike lane.
Every tree in the entire state.
And not just 1 million trees along the whole stretch, 1 million trees every block will be killed by the Summit Avenue bike trail, which I was astonished by this when I found it out. Is not even a thing they're going to do in the near term or the medium term. It's like a long-term plan, and everyone griping about it, very few of them will still be alive when it goes in.
Yeah. Yeah, and so there's this disconnect in values, right? And this, like, we're having a discussion or an argument or a debate, assuming we've got a certain piece of common ground that we don't. And so a thing that we can do to build that common ground is to not ignore the data, right? That, like, data is really, really important, continues to be important, but to engage in conversations from a values-based place. That does not just invoke the value of data, but that invokes values like great neighborhoods for kids and like access to education and like things that we do actually have some chance at finding some common ground on, and then talk about how those values relate to the kind of decisions we want to be making, right?
Yeah.
So that's really powerful because it invites new people in, right? There's this article, I think it has been kind of making the rounds by Maurice Mitchell, who's head of the Working Families Party, I think. I probably did not get his title right. But it talks, there's a section in there where, because the whole article is about where our movements are succeeding, where our movements are falling short, critiques people have of our movement, again, broadly, left of center, and how we might begin to operate in ways that help us get clear on what is actually required to achieve the kind of change we all want. And one of the things he talks about in that piece is maximalism and the tendency to want to align with people who are 100% aligned with us. And there's a sentence in there that I will probably slightly misquote, but he said, the simple fact is that there are not enough people who are already 100% aligned with us.
Yeah.
To achieve the kinds of things we want to achieve. And so when we think about like the role of values relative to movement building, values is what like helps people move, right? They're not like, like you don't go watch a movie and like leave that movie feeling like, wow, I was so moved. That was so, like, I watch people do courageous things with spreadsheets, right? Like the place that people want to act from is a place of emotion and a place of values, and that's like having that vision and connecting every one of these like micro battles that we have about our streetscape to that set of values is really, really important, because it's part of what helps people like feel connected and feel part of something bigger. Speaking to values and then like bringing people in, right? Your voice is one voice. It is always more work to organize more people in, to say like, yeah, I could send in this comment letter for the umpteenth time, but what if instead I talk to my neighbor who has never done this before and equip them with the tools to send in this comment letter so that next time there are two of us. That's how we win in the long term.
I think how we win is by being fun. We'd be
Also that.
more fun. Because the other side, and by other side I mean people who, you know, want to defund bike infrastructure, for example. There's I don't know, meanness. There can be anger on that side, and I think if we can be fun and happy, and because you know why I'm in this, Elissa? I don't know why you're in this, and I'm not going to specify what I mean by this. I'm in it for quality of life. I want my life to be easier and better, and I think everyone else is like me and should live like me.
Just have.
Okay, here we go.
Oh my God, people stopping
People
here.
stopped. It's because I looked so clueless coming to that intersection, trying to come up with my next words and not realizing it was an intersection. But I'm in this for quality of life. I think, you know, driving less, living close to things and people being together in large groups and not spending 2 hours a day commuting in a car. You're going to be happier and healthier. It's a better way to live, and more people should be able to afford that lifestyle and have a safe place to walk and bike and live near the grocery store, things like that. I don't know, I think I have a good positive vision of the future in a way that like some other people just are opposed to things and they're not happy with the way things are, but they're definitely not happy with things changing. Why are you in this, Elissa? What are you trying to accomplish?
I mean, I think unsurprisingly, I want a lot of the same things you do. There's a book I want to talk about. It's called Until We Reckon by Danielle Sered. It's a book about restorative justice. I already mentioned in 2015 I was hit by a driver. I was in the hospital. I had a TBI. I was out of work for a while. I still have some chronic pain stuff that I deal with. I still have gravel in my face. Not my favorite. And one of the things that book dissects in trying to lay out a case for restorative justice as a movement and a strategy is that, like, survivors of all different kinds of violence want lots of different things, but one of the things that is like the only universal thing, right? Like when you talk to people who have experienced any kind of violence, is that they don't want the thing that happened to them to happen to anybody else, right? Like when you really dig deep. And that sometimes does not appear true in first conversation, but that like holds true as an axiom, which is a really powerful thing to think about how we organize around. But that's true for me, right? I was hit by a driver, I was hospitalized. It was a life-changing experience in some good ways and some very terrible ways. And I don't want it to happen to anybody else, right? And the way that I don't want it to happen is by creating all those things you talked about, right? Communities where people don't have to drive, where they have access to all the things that not only they need, but that make them happy. That's why I'm in it. I believe we can all have something better. So this is where we finish, the Sabo Bridge.
We should close it out.
We should close it out. This is where, you don't want to close it out with a beautiful view of this highway, John? Doesn't that thematically, again, we're at one of those value meets values things.
Okay, Elissa, we're here at the end.
We're here at the end.
I feel like I always end on a poignant moment with these. There's something about like an hour-long bike ride that makes people open up.
Any kind of bike ride is a good bike ride.
Being out of breath, brings up emotions.
Well, it's nice to keep your body busy so your brain can do its thing.
Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for riding.
Elissa Schufman has been my biking partner for this episode. I'm John Edwards. This is the Wedge Live podcast. Thank you for listening.
Have a safe ride.
Thank you for that.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.